Those weeks on the river researching life on the Mississippi, and those reminiscences of my former life on it and along the banks of it, had dredged up all manner of memories that got me to reflecting deeply on what life was like for those living in those bygone days. Not just for me and mine, but for all those who inhabited the region, including the slaves and slavers, the abolitionists, and the common folk, for the children as well as the adults. I had long been working on a sequel to the book about Tom Sawyer's adventures, featuring his companion Huckleberry Finn, but this return to the scenes of my youth had given impetus to finally finishing it. I had begun the book about Huck before I had even completed the one about Tom, but had pigeonholed it several times for months or even years, and sometimes wondered whether I would ever finish it. I had even come close to destroying the manuscript on at least one occasion. But over the years, the desire to bring Huck's book to completion gradually grew and sprouted and spread throughout my brain and heart. I finally completed it in 1884, and it was published early in 1885. It was actually published in the United Kingdom before the United States in December of 1884. Then 2 months later it came out in the United States. I did not have to wait long for a reaction to it. Huck was banned by the Concord, Massachusetts Library as unfit for human consumption. Those wise heads waited and found it wanting, even referring to it as the veriest trash. This, though, did not upset me. No, for I knew that judgment on their part meant more money in my pocket. The ban would sell my books due to the free publicity and curiosity that Huck's expulsion provoked. Other libraries followed suit. In order to read Huck, those who felt the need to discover for themselves why Huck had met with such disapprobation would need to purchase the book, rather than borrow a copy of it from their local library. I estimated another 20,000 sales would come as a result of that ban. If only every library in the nation would have banned and panned that wild child of my brain. In earlier years, it was first Bret Harte who had helped me edit some of my works, mainly The Innocents Abroad. Later, Howells assisted me in stylistic matters. I had another editor, though, one with almost unlimited power to red pencil whatever was found to be especially lacking in good taste. Livy. I always read the daily output of my pen to her and the girls at day's end. Livy would let me know if something I had written had been laid on too thick or was too strong or coarse. It was always just those parts which Livy disapproved, of which delighted our daughters the most, as evidenced by their joyful titterings. Livy, that pitiless executioner of deliciously vulgar statements, would forcefully scratch out these parts with her pencil. Livy was right, though. Her judgment was better than mine in such matters. Sometimes, though, I would play tricks on her by salting the manuscript with gems of the brazenest shockiness, which I, of course, knew she would hastily scribble out. I had no intention of leaving these in the manuscript in the first place, but reveled in the violent way she would heartlessly evict those passages from the fruits of my laborious toil. On one or two occasions, though, you could have knocked me down with a feather when she let some things pass unexpurgated, which I later quietly removed myself. That reminds me of another occasion related to Huck Finn. Perhaps it doesn't really belong here, but it shows how writing that book affected my life and that I myself derived pleasure from reading it. You see, I don't always remember what I have written or whether I have written something down anywhere at all. And so, if I am to take up one of my books in later years, I might be surprised by what I find in it and not only not remember writing it, but may not even remember much about the events that inspired a certain passage. An advantage of these forgetfulnesses was that they sometimes afforded me unabashed and unashamed delight as I discovered delicious passages in certain of my works. Such was the case one day when I was sitting in a chair by an upstairs room reading from one of my books. Livy came up and caught me laughing uproariously over something on the page under my glance. She inquired which book it was that I had found such pleasure in. Shaken out of my reverie by this unwanted inquiry, and too embarrassed to admit that it was a book of my own, I averred that I did not know which book it was or who the author was, and that I had simply grabbed a volume from the shelf without looking at its title and opened to a random page. Curious, she looked over my shoulder only to discover that it was Huck Finn that I was reading. She told me that I should be ashamed of myself for this wanton display of self-congratulation.